If you want to experience the effects of, food, you have to be consistent at it. And consistency doesn't mean 24/7, right? You can decide. It could be 3 days, 4 days, 5 days of the week. You commit to eating a certain way with certain principles, right? And the other 2 days, life is a balance.
Hi everyone, welcome to our chat today. This is Wellness Curated by Anshu Bahanda, and today I have a chat for you on food. So the topic is food as medicine. I have today a company called Food Hak, which is the first company that takes clinical research on food and brings it to life. We're chatting with the founder, Sakshi Chhabra Mittal, and she has a background in biotech. She's worked at Pfizer doing clinical trials. Then she went on to do an MBA, after which she joined SoftBank and she was investing in health and food science. And now she set up the Food Hak. Hi, Sakshi. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you.
So tell me, why food is medicine? Tell me your thinking behind starting Food Hak.
Sure. So I have a biotech background. Most recently, I was investing in healthcare. I've looked at many diseases and, the sort of curative solutions around it. And for a lot of the diseases, actually for most of them, there was always a link between food, but I wouldn't necessarily hear the doctors talk about food as curative medicine, right? Unless something very wrong happened. Plus, today, I have two kids, and during my first pregnancy, I developed a rare liver breakdown called obstetric cholestasis, which is very stressful for a new mom because if you leave the baby in too long, it can cause stillbirth, and if you take the baby out too soon, you deal with premature related defects for a long time. Yeah, your liver function, you keep on doing these blood tests multiple times in a day, and your LFTs, liver function tests, are like shooting through the roof, and it's just, it causes a lot of anxiety. And apparently it comes back with a vengeance the second time around. Like it comes back much earlier in the pregnancy, so the baby is even more premature, and it's a lot harder to control. So yeah, like after my first pregnancy is when I kind of went into the clinical science of OC and pregnancy and what woman's body, and I actually then discovered a lot of clinical data on food. That shows that food can be your medicine. It can help you avoid diseases, prevent diseases, reverse diseases. But I could never order anything on Deliveroo with the principles that I had come up with when I was trying to change food. So I realized the food that we are surrounded by is wrong. And I just thought that, it's basically leading people into one direction, which is that of chronic diseases, without us having any control over this.
Okay.
So I changed my food, and during the second pregnancy, OC never came back. Doctors kept on doing the tests. The only difference between the two pregnancies were I was following these 5 or 6 principles, and I was on this anti-inflammatory diet and basically managed to avoid obstetric cholestasis.
That's magnificent. I mean, that is incredible. Tell me a bit about the clinical research that you talk about, that you're doing at Food Hak.
I realized that I was the bottleneck. I had to read clinical research, and there's about 30,000 papers that come out every year. And not all of them are good and solid research. They're funded by public versus private. Sometimes it's a very small group of people. And so I had to kind of sit there, sift through this research, and then kind of create these recipes. And it was, going to be a very difficult task for me to scale. So the first thing I did at Food Hak was I hired a bunch of engineers who would, by using natural language processing and machine learning, they would look at all this clinical research, clean it up, rank it, understand ingredient disease links. We also have human intervention. We have a lot of medical doctors that we work with, and we ask them to kind of, rate the score on these papers to cross-validate and keep improving this technology engine. And then you take those ingredients, you go to your chefs, and you create all kinds of cuisines around it, right? And then you take that dish, because that dish could have medicinal properties, but it could be very high in fats, so it goes back into another software, which helps us understand, maybe let's reduce the coconut milk by 30%, 20%. And so at the end of it, you end up getting a personalized dish which could be disease targeted or does not have to be disease targeted, but it has superfoods that have medicinal properties. It's delicious. It's like a Thai, your favorite Thai green curry or something.
Right.
And our belief is that if you consistently eat like this, a few times a week, but you show consistency in doing that. For someone like me, luckily I don't suffer from any medical illnesses. For me, I know I can avoid that cardiovascular disease that's waiting around the corner for me 10 years later.
Okay. What are the three most important findings that you've implemented at Food Hak?
I think the first one was consistency, right? And I know this is like a very obvious one, but just like you pop a pill and you don't expect the next day your cholesterol to come down, just like you exercise one day and you don't get your six-pack the next day, it requires consistency. Similarly, if you want to experience the effects of, food, you have to be consistent at it. And consistency doesn't mean 24/7, right? You can decide. It could be 3 days, 4 days, 5 days of the week. You commit to eating a certain way with certain principles, right? And the other 2 days, life is a balance. So I think consistency, which is why we've launched as a subscription model, which is once you've decided how much you want to give to this food, every week you should stick to it. You can change the foods you want, but that's why it's a subscription. I think the second big learning was inflammation is the root cause of 90% of all diseases, literally. Lots of things can cause inflammation, but a big factor is food, right? So one should be eating in an anti-inflammatory way, right? Which is why we are built on those principles where we avoid using any foods that have, inflammatory properties. And we end up doing a lot of ingredient swaps to make the dish anti-inflammatory. The sort of last big learning for me was sugars, and I think everybody kind of knows about it, but that really plays with your organs a lot. Your pancreas, it keeps like the more kind of sugar you have, the glycemic response in your body, your pancreas are in an overdrive, and organs constantly working in overdrive is where they stop working properly, and that's when you develop these chronic lifelong diseases, right? So avoiding refined sugars, we saw was a big link. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff, but yeah, I would say these are the three big learnings.
Give us some guiding principles on what food and food types would you say are the healthiest?
So I think like a big inflammatory marker is dairy. So avoid dairy. These days you have amazing alternatives. All kinds of milk. I mean, if you have the time and you're fortunate enough, if you can make your own kind of nut milks at home, I think there's nothing like it. Be wary of some of the market non-dairy milks because a lot of them are made up of sugar and canola oil. So be wary of that. But I would say avoid dairy because that's super inflammatory. I would say reduce or avoid your meat intake a lot. There is a very strong correlation we are seeing in the studies with meat and cancer. Like meat when it's cooked, and this is not just red meat for sure. Like my thesis is like what the cigarette industry went through in the 1990s or 80s, right? Where they were saying whatever they wanted to in their advertising, and suddenly the government stepped in and said, no. Like cigarettes used to advertise saying, we are an appetite, we help you with weight loss. So suddenly everybody is, that was their advertising because it's an appetite suppressant, right? And the government stepped in saying, no, start adding pictures of lungs and showing people the bad impact it can have on your body. I think processed red meat will be, this is my thesis, this is my hunch, will go through something similar because processed red meat has super high correlations, almost causations with cancer. And I think generally eating meat has also shown these kind of correlations. So I would say reduce that, avoid it wherever possible, introduce 30 plants. The guiding principle should always be in a week, introduce 30 plants, try and eat 30 plants. And then within plants, actually, there are certain families of vegetables that are very good for you. And there are certain that can be inflammatory. So like in that, for example, we don't use any eggplant, aubergines. They're almost toxic, I know they're delicious, but try and avoid that. Tomatoes, potatoes, nightshades, these can be inflammatory or they can have digestive issues like cauliflower can cause bloating. Even look at the beans that you're eating. The kind of larger the bean, the more, bloaty, inflammatory it is. So like a lot of the beans we use are mostly mung beans. Mung beans are good. So just be mindful of even the plant-based, whole plant-based food, which ones you want to double down on and which one you want to avoid. Like I would double down on your family of courgettes, butternut squash. We've got bottle gourd in India. Bitter gourd is amazing for diabetics. Carrots, have more of the courgettes and the carrots and the spinach and the squashes and have less of the nightshades.
Okay. Do you have an example of when I know your food has helped you and that's what encouraged you to start Food Hack? Can you give me an example of when your food has helped someone else?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, recently we got introduced to this really lovely human being. She's actually now a friend. Her name is Farina Wazir. She's an actress. She's a Bollywood actress. But a couple of years ago, she developed a form of an autoimmune disease, which causes mast cell activation. And as a result, like it shows up on her skin. Like her skin becomes very red, inflamed, swollen. And acting is a career, her face is her career, right? So her career's kind of been on a bit of a halt over the last couple of years, and she's been seeing lots and lots of doctors, and they've put her on really strong steroids, and nobody wants to be on. She's young, she's got all this energy, she's got this like positive attitude towards life, and she's beautiful. Like last thing you want to do is be on these really strong steroids. And yeah, so we decided to run to run an experiment with her. We obviously understood, all that was going on. We had our medical professionals involved as well. And so we put her on this very strict 2-week detox. And it was broken up into 2 parts. The first part was 4 days of nothing but khichdi every day. Khichdi is made up of red lentil, mung beans, rice, turmeric, garlic, ginger, fennel seeds. Just keep it very simple. Bit of salt, right? And 1 vegetable was added to it, And this was, even though it's not technically a mono diet, but it is very similar to a mono diet, right?
Yes, in Ayurveda, they consider it a mono food, so to say.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So we put her on that for 4 days. So, day 2, she obviously felt a little, low in energy, right? Because it's a shock to your system. No tea, no coffee. Right? Day 3, she felt her energy levels were back. She was waking up at like 5:30, doing her yoga. More importantly, by day 3, her skin had gone back to normal, like what it was 2 years ago. And when she uses steroids, it takes her about 10 days. So, I didn't expect the effect to be this powerful, but it shows to you how powerful food is as a medicine when taken appropriately in the right amounts in a well-educated way compared to drugs.
I've seen response to things, but day 3 sounds absolutely amazing, actually.
Yeah, it was completely cleared, and then we introduced. Then for 2 days, it was a weekend, so we introduced a few other foods from Food Hack, like a kheer, brownies, soup, so something different from a khichdi. And then Monday again, she was back on that Monday to Friday a khichdi diet.
You had said that sugar is really, really bad for you. And you're talking about kheer and you're talking about brownies. And I know you do those yummy ashwagandha brownies. But how do you work the sugar and how do you work with the glycemic index there?
I mean, we don't use any refined sugars. We use more plant-based natural sugars, right? But these are not for your every day, but these are to replace those times when you feel indulgent, when you feel like having a brownie. I'd rather you have this brownie because it has no white flour. It's made up of millet flour. Millets have actually shown to help with diabetes. Actually, millets in studies have shown to, can even reverse diabetes. So, it's got very clean ingredients. It's still low cal. When you eat it, it feels like the real thing. So your craving is gone, right? And you don't go for that, sugar, sort of white flour based market brownie. So these are kind of more indulgences. Yeah, so we sent her these things because she has a sweet tooth, and after 4 days she had done so well. The doctors thought that, let's start introducing other things into her diet. And then put her back on khichdi again, just to make sure her gut was completely cleansed. So that was the whole point of a khichdi is, any parasites in your stomach, just a very, very strong gut cleanse, right? Because that is what's linked with autoimmune and mast cell activation. And then by the end of it, the result was, obviously the attack had been reversed, very, very quickly. It was under control. But I think she had sort of learned this 80-20 or this 90-10 rule in life, which is, how to kind of keep the attack under control. Right. So, like I actually met her, we went out and, we even indulged a bit, right? But she told me that, it's all under control because I know how to eat like 90% of the time. And the 10% when I go out, I don't want to deprive myself when all my friends are, eating and drinking. And so, that's the kind of balance she's found.
Yeah. But tell me, is it meant to replace the food that you cook at home?
It just depends, right? So like you eat 3 times a day, there's 7 days in a week, 365 days in a year, right? You're going to cook a few times, but you do get tired, right? You do want a bit of a change. You feel a bit lazy. Life got in the way, right? So our premise is built on the fact that, this is not like if you were to order Deliveroo, right? This is half the price of that. Hopefully the flavors are still there, but it's built on all these principles, right? That after eating it, it's still that complicated mapo tofu, which, I mean, let's be honest, who can make mapo tofu at home? But it's still that mapo tofu, but it's vegan and it's got like, superfood like ginseng. It's working on your energy and well-being. And, so it's supposed to help, it's supposed to supplement you with your cooking. It's supposed to replace the unhealthy takeouts. Those people who don't cook, like, there are different demographics of people, right? I feel like the younger generation now are so focused on the planet and their health, and they're not really cook friendly because they've all got like these 2 gigs, they've got a full-time job and they've got a side hustle and they're a social life and they're busy Londoners and they earn well, working in tech companies or whatever, that for them, this is the perfect solution. They don't have to go grocery shop. It's priced at market. It's not like we didn't want to make it a premium product. We want the masses to be able to aspire to it, access it, be able to afford it. So it just depends in which demographic you fall under. A lot of our families, like mothers, want their kids to eat veggies. A big problem that customers have in the market is it's very difficult to find vegan, vegetarian, plant-based food that have lots of veggies. Like every dish has like 5 vegetables, and plus, like, these are different. They're not like dishes that you can easily get in most of the places, like stir fries. You get everywhere, right? These are kind of, like I mentioned, mapo tofu. They are quite different flavors. You want to expose your kids to eating vegetables in a more interesting way, not necessarily just through salads and stuff.
And is it as healthy as home food?
It's healthier than home food. Like, it's definitely healthier than what I cook at home, because there is so much, these are data-driven recipes, right? Like, we want them to be low cal, we want them to be anti-inflammatory, low glycemic index, free from gluten, free from refined sugars, free from dairy, right? Very difficult to get all these 6 characteristics in a home-cooked meal. You'll be surprised. Like, even like we're Indian, you make like a vegetable Indian style. You'll be surprised at how many calories there are in that vegetable and what is the nutrient content of that dish. Because sometimes you end up overcooking it. The more you cook the food, the more nutrition you lose, right? The vitamins, the small molecules evaporate away. So I would say these are definitely healthier than restaurant, than home cooking.
Okay. Can you give us some tools and techniques that people can take back to so that they can lead healthier lives?
Yeah, so I think, so let's try and replace things, right? So we said free from dairy, right?
Yeah.
So for those of us who eat cottage cheese, paneer, you could replace that with tofu. It has very good protein content. It's a great source of plant protein. I think this whole soy estrogen link that has been very controversial, I would just take that with a pinch of salt. That's an example again where very large companies they built these very large empires, right, around you eating dairy, and they funded these clinical trials, and so I would just take that with a grain of salt. So yeah, let's talk about ingredient swaps. If you like tomatoes and you like a Mediterranean style thing, let's swap them out with maybe cherry tomatoes. Tomatoes are quite acidic, can be
Okay.
inflammatory, reflux. I would swap out the potatoes for sweet potatoes,
Okay.
right? I would avoid aubergines, gluten, right? Now, gluten is a big one. You won't find a lot of clinical studies showing that gluten has been associated with X, Y, and Z. But if you speak to doctors who are highly experienced, who spent for example, let's take pregnancy, for example, right? So my doctor, she's a, very well-known obstetrician. She spent her entire life, and she's, in her 60s, 70s now. She spent her entire life, giving birth to kids, for patients. And she tells you that there is a big difference between the uterus lining of women who eat gluten and who don't eat gluten. The walls are a lot softer when you're gluten free, so it makes it a lot easier for the baby to come out, right?
Interesting.
I would avoid gluten. It's a protein that we don't necessarily digest very well, and it can cause a lot of issues. So yeah, how can you avoid gluten? Rice flour, buckwheat, millet, gram flour. There's so many different ways, right? So, but yeah, I would, if you're buying bread, just buy the gluten free rather than the normal. Let's be a little bit more proactive about it. Sugar free. Like I would avoid, walking into bakeries and trying to find something to eat. Just give it up. Like there's no point. Get your coffee and go somewhere healthier to pick up a snack with the coffee.
What is your view on the meat substitutes?
I would not necessarily think of them as healthy.
Okay.
If you want burgers, make them out of vegetables. Very easy to do with mushrooms. Very easy to do with soy, and then you can add a bunch of grated veg, bind it with gram flour, rice flour, whatever it is. I wouldn't go for the meat substitutes. Rather go for the real stuff than it's highly processed.
Okay. Which millet can we use to make traditional roti?
There are different types of millets. I think finger millet is the best one. It's also called ragi,
Ragi.
flour. A lot of us Indians will be quite familiar with ragi. That's the best one.
Any weight loss tips?
Weight loss tips, I think soups work really well. Just have a cup of soup. Soups are very low cal. At least our soups are very low cal. They come in a big bag of 600 grams. A cup size is about 300 grams. And it just also reduces, if you have it in a cup, for me, psychologically, also reduces the need to have tea and coffee because you're sipping through it, especially in winters. You can have 2 of those cups and it'll just be like 100 something calories. I think soups are great for that, especially at night. Have an early dinner. I think intermittent fasting is really good, and there's actually research showing that intermittent fasting really helps with autophagy, which is linked with longevity. How do you live longer? So if you can do a 16-8 fast, so skip breakfast in the morning, try and push your lunch to as later as you can. Ayurveda says you should only really be eating this much, right? So you find that after fasting, you're not able to eat that much anyway. So that's a good way of kind of keeping your stomach, not expanded.
Right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this chat. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to this page. Please subscribe to our podcast on Apple and Spotify, Wellness Curated. And follow us on Instagram, Wellness Curated, the number 1. Thank you.